Hey, Mike here with Canadian Musician right now in downtown Toronto with me. Originally from Ontario, but now based in LA, and I guess kind of making the trip back home for some press. But of course, Canada's newest, I guess, pop hit songwriter, Allie X. Allie, how you doing?
Very excellently, thank you.
Good, good. Of course, you're in town to promote your debut LP, as Allie X, COLLXTION II. It's a follow-up, of course, to COLLXTION I, which is the EP in 2015. You strike me as the kind of person that an album such as this, and it's kind of obvious that an album such as this is more than just a collection of songs, that there's a unified vision, it's a multimedia project, there's photos, videos, GIFs, a bunch of stuff that goes along with it as a fully formed artistic vision. Could you just kind of expand on that thought? Like, when crafting this collection, what was that vision? What were you trying to convey with COLLXTION II?
Well, I always feel that the visual side of what I do is very much a part of the entire feeling that that I want people to get from the project, and I think that the songs are, you know, strong enough to stand on their own. But I feel like for you to fully understand like what I'm about and the world that I'm trying to create, there has to be a multimedia approach. So yeah, that's the reason behind it. There's also there's a story that's being told chapter by chapter with each collection. The story of X, which is it's an abstract autobiographical tale of a girl who spins too hard and ends up switching places with her shadow. And so, you know, chapter 1 came out with COLLXTION I, chapter 2 is in the deluxe gatefold vinyl of chapter 2. And yeah, you know, I guess I'm just trying to give people the closest full representation of what's going on in this crazy head of mine.
If it's that, like you say, abstract autobiographical story you're telling, first off, do you know how many collections there will be, and do you have a sense of where in that story you are in that case?
I don't. I feel that I've definitely progressed in my own story and in my own truth, you know, which is the idea behind the project through the first 2 collections. But I still feel like I have so much more to explore and so many questions that are unanswered. I think my goal with this whole project, besides being a professional musician, which, like, let's not kid ourselves, is to figure out who I am and what my truth is. And yeah, I don't feel too close to that yet, so I'm gonna keep writing. Is the plan? Yeah.
Like, aside from, you know, COLLXTION I, COLLXTION II, continue to write as a solo artist, you're also you know, you went out to LA, established a career as a professional songwriter, you know, writing with and for other people. Yeah. How did doing solo work, becoming a performing artist in addition to songwriter, did that career, I guess, expand parallel to the songwriting career, or at some point did you just realize you wanted to perform your own songs?
I've always wanted to be an artist, and in the process of figuring out what my sound was and like how to write songs, I just ended up, and even how to produce it eventually right before I left, I just developed a huge body of work. To be honest though, the publishing deal I got was still a fluke. I had no cuts with anybody, and if I signed to a Canadian company that was based in LA and happened to be associated with one of the best producers in the world, Circuit, who just, you know, he's had a bunch of #1s, and he just did like the Weeknd's album. And so I just really got lucky, and I was also just so persistent and in their face about how, you know, how much I wanted it. But yeah, so, you know, and when I signed my publishing deal, I wasn't too forward about being an artist. I didn't want anyone to think that was my focus. So I said I was a songwriter, and then maneuvered my way to the point where I could release Catch, and then that went really well.
Out of curiosity, you say Canadian publishing company based in LA. That makes me think LA, but I'm not actually sure who you're signed with. Is it LA by chance?
No, it's not a Canadian. It's Canadian. Well, Circuit's Canadian, so that's what the Canadian part is. Okay. And then I'm signed to Circuit through Prescription as well, which is an American company. Yeah.
How did that? Like you said, you hadn't had. You were a songwriter, but you hadn't had any marquee cuts and that kind of stuff. How did you end up getting, I guess, connected to Circuit and getting that deal in that case?
I just knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy, and I, like I said, I was really in their face about it, not in an obnoxious way, but just in a like, I'm here and I really want to do it, and I'll do anything, and it worked out because I was. When they started to look to a writer to sign, because they only had 2 producers at that point, I guess I was the one that popped up in their heads. Yeah, it was one of those fluky, life-changing things, and I still don't really understand how I was so broke here. I really don't understand how I got to LA. I did so many different things to make it happen, but it wasn't it wasn't an overnight thing at all.
You've had. If what you can read from Wikipedia and elsewhere obviously is to be believed, you've had a pretty extensive and varied career and path up until this point, and before that, fortuitous meeting with Circuit. Like, I know you're raised in Oakville, from what I understand. Went to a pretty art-centric high school in Etobicoke. Went to Michigan to study piano and vocals. Came back, did the theater program in Sheridan. What happens from there? Because
Mommy doesn't like to talk about any of that. Since starting the Allie X project, it's a lot about kind of wiping the slate clean and being who you want to be in this moment. So it isn't something that I talk about in interviews, like all that stuff you just mentioned. But it's fine. I mean,
in that case,
that you remembered all that.
There's it's I was doing a lot of reading. It's quite fascinating, and what we do is often about that artistic career evolution and how that happens. At least is our kind of forte of Canadian musician, but I guess to start off with the points, the birth of Allie X. Yes. Essentially, what was that vision? I guess we're starting to see it with COLLXTION I and COLLXTION II, but I guess what was the impetus for the creation of Allie X and what you wanted to do with it?
The conception and the pregnancy all took place in Toronto, in an apartment about the size of this room, with a really shitty laptop that would shut down every 30 minutes. Hopefully my changes were saved. And I had reached a point where I could not get the sound that I wanted. And so with that shitty laptop, I started to learn Ableton. And I was not very good. I'm still not amazing. I just have a really good ear and understanding of arrangement. I have great ideas. So what I discovered was once I started putting parts in, I never had anyone telling me, oh, we're out of time, whatever. I just work all night. I got my ideas across. I started to learn the language of production so that when I wanted to finish a song with someone, I could tell them the kick's too loud, whatever, you need a higher end on the EQ on the vocal or whatever. And all of a sudden, that was a game changer for me. I also had the realization that I was pop. I wasn't indie. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd say I am indie pop, and everyone says I'm left-leaning, and I am because I'm so weird, but it was in that apartment that I had all these realizations, and I made so many mood boards, and I just started to build it, and I felt like I had it in my hands. At that time, was I calling it the Allie X project? No, it was in a transition, but when I examined all the work in that first little bit, when I moved to LA, that's when I started to call it Allie X and have this concept of X, and so that's kind of the before it was birthed in 2014. That's where it started.
It's interesting. Like, one of the things you say, is you're pop, you weren't indie. You can say indie pop. There's alternative pop, art pop. There's any number of names you can give it.
Pop is I mean, I think that streaming platforms have changed the way that we listen to pop and the pop music that becomes popular, which is really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I read Spotify has like something like 1,700 different genre names or something within it.
Yeah,
It's getting ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you are a classically trained musician, but like you said, you had that realization. You are where your love is, where your ear is in that pop realm. But at the same time, there's an artistic depth to your music. I still think if you just say, oh, they're a pop singer, there's a superficialness to that I do not hear, would not associate with what you're doing. How did you, I don't even know, it's probably too abstract, I don't even know if you could explain this, but what was it that you wanted to do with pop music? You're not making music that's, like I said, it's not superficial pop music, but you identify as a pop artist. So if you could put a end goal on it, what do you want to do to pop music?
Look, I've always wanted attention. I've always wanted to be well known. I've always been this like tortured person who just wants to be like, I guess like loved deep down, you know, and the way that I've always made friends is through singing and music. So there's that. But in terms of like the actual genre of pop, I mean, it's such an interesting topic. And, you know, just because something is pop doesn't mean it's top 40 necessarily. And just because something is top 40 doesn't mean it's bad necessarily. For me, my realization that I was a pop artist, it was mostly melodic. I was just, and the way that I sing, I was in an indie scene in Toronto, and I just realized, you know what, like, I got people coming to my shows, but if they're indie people that think it's like ironically cool. They're not, these aren't pop fans, like, and there isn't really a place for me, and I'm not really understood. So, I need to carve out my own lane. Yeah.
Can you pinpoint a song, or a point, or the creation or the writing of a song when you're like, I know I've found my sound now?
Oh God, yeah. Well, there's a few. I like this question. Catch was a melody that I wrote with my friend Steve McKay. He's a great musician. Just down the road there, at a piano, it was like a single finger like bass line. It was like an R&B swing thing, and he used to be like, "All I needed was a medicine," and you can like, you know, it had this thing, and I loved we finished the lyrics, and I loved the song, but for the life of me, I could not figure out the way that it was to be produced. I took it to a number of different producers, and I myself made 14 or 15 demos of it. I've got the proof in my iTunes, trying all these different methods, and it took me 2 years to get to the point where it was the Catch that was on the radio in Canada. And I almost like, I have this thing where I'm so stubborn with songs. Like I almost gave up, but I never did, because I always knew there was something special there. And when Catch was finished, that was an amazing feeling. Like I knew it. I knew that this was gonna work. Even though I didn't know it hadn't had any success yet, I was just like, yes. Another one was, well, this one just it's a leak. It never came out, but one called Tongue Tied. I did that whole arrangement and a whole lyric and everything by myself, and had that like a cool arpeggiated bass line. You haven't even heard the song, but like that's another one where I was like, yes. And then finally Prime was a 100%er for me as well. I came up with the melody in the shower. Thanks. And the lyrics just came to, I remember just obsessing over it over a week, just like non-stop working on it. And the demo, I mean, the demo that I made sounded really shitty, but like the parts are all there. The bass line, like the drum pattern, like, and then I took it to LP from Mastercraft, and then this other guy, Mike Wise, and we finished it. And I remember the final thing at Mike's studio, when it just started to come together, I was shaking. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God. I was about to leave for LA, and I was like, I need to go armed with these songs. These are my weapons. And they were, and they like, those songs made it happen for me.
That's awesome.
That was because all those other bad demos I mentioned earlier, none of them would have done anything when you start playing them for A&Rs and stuff. And so yeah, I went there armed with those, and people started to like. I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be, because people started to like perk up and yeah, okay, la la la. But that's like it's like a good memory when I finally found it.
I love that you took control of the producer side of your career. Like obviously you mentioned LP circuit, which not enough artists across the board are doing that. But you know, I've talked to Tasha the Amazon Wonder Girl, Tegan and Sarah were very critical this year when the Juno Awards came out that you know, an absurd number, like a vast majority of technical nominees were all men. And
Yeah,
there's
Rhymes had a similar complaint last year, yeah.
There's a real push, I feel, that it's like, all right, the industry needs to do more to welcome and create a space for females in the studio, and female artists need to take control of that part of their career. So it's awesome that you've done that. Like, what was your experience entering that studio world as not just as the songwriter, as the performer, but taking control of the producer end of things? What's been your experience on that side of it?
I myself haven't experienced a ton of sexism since I've learned production at all. I've actually encountered mostly, you know, respectful guys who are like, oh, that's cool that you know that. Let's work on it together. I'll send you the files or whatever. But at the same time, like, I always feel like there's this attitude for girls in a session where it's sort of like pat on the head, like, okay, you sit on the couch at the back and work on the lyrics. Like, that's kind of like, or like you're in a session with two other guys. One of them's a writer, one of them's a producer, and you're a writer. And there's just this weird assumption that you're going to be the lyricist because you're a girl. I myself am not a quick lyricist, and I feel like I'm a good lyricist, but it just takes me a long time. And so I always feel so weird in that situation when I want to be like, just kind of being like, that bass sound is whack, like, or whatever, you know. But yeah, while there is that sort of like assumption, when I actually do communicate in a strong way that I want to, you know, have a same production, most people are really accepting. What I do think is the problem is, like, with young girls, I think it's starting to happen, but I don't think they realize, like, that production isn't only like a guy thing. But I think it's going to change because everyone who has a MacBook has GarageBand, you know, and like my like sister has like gotten into it, you know, and I think it will change. I just think it's important to get the message out to young girls that, like, they're not going to be any less qualified than like young boys, you know. Yeah.
I hope to see more of that. I know, like, talking to Samantha Slatery at Women in Music Canada, they've been doing stuff with Harris Institute and places like that to try to get, you know, just create those spaces and that awareness and provide that education on that side of it.
And I want to say, sorry, I'm like passionate about this. If it wasn't for learning production, for me, I wouldn't have gotten to where I am now. And not to say where I am now is like amazing, but like, without learning that, I wouldn't have found my sound, because I knew in my heart what it was supposed to sound like, and nobody else did, and I had to find a way to get it out. And so, like, if you're a young girl watching, like, and you want to be a singer, and you can tailor your own sound if you learn those simple skills. It could be a total game changer for you. Yeah.
And before we wrap up, I'm just interested in, you say you're a good lyricist, but not a fast lyricist. We were talking about the production, but when you bring it all together, what is your process as far as how are you usually piecing songs together? And is it usually starting with the beat, with the lyrics? Are they coming together at the same time? How is that typically working for you?
I get this question fairly often, and what I say is that it's always different. I have ideas. I have songs on COLLXTION II that just were started as ideas for other people in a typical LA session sort of thing. A song called Lifted, we wrote that for like this guy Max Frost. He was in the room, so the writer Marius Mocha, and it was a completely different song. It was actually called Love Fucked. It was like totally not in my realm at all sonically, but the melody, like I just loved that melody. And so for 3 years, I tried to crack it, and then I completely rewrote the verse and the pre. And that is like kind of the process that I take with songs. Like I got really stuck on melodies and really stubborn. There's a few like that on the record. Sometimes with a song like Simon Says or Paper Love or Vintage, I started with, not Vintage. Vintage started as a melody. But the other two, that started as a beat.
Paper Love, I love. No, but yeah, no, it is a fantastic song.
That's one of my favorites. Yeah, thank you very much.
And since the birth of Allie X, it seems like things have been progressing quickly. You know, your shows have been getting bigger, the attention has been getting bigger, the press is getting bigger, the streams are wrapping up, you know, or counting up, whatever you put, however you put it. But yeah, since the birth of Allie X, like I said, it's been happening quickly. What's the blueprint from here? Where do you want this to go in the next, say, 4 or 5 years?
It's pretty simple. I want as many people as possible to hear my music. Yeah, but I want to never lose my integrity or the sort of like ugliness that makes me special, you know. And another, you know, the side that people don't see too much is there's just, it's a business. Like I do stuff like this, and I'm on my social media, but I'm also like in my inbox for half the day. And the more that the big lesson, like in the last 2 years, has been like you really have to be a boss. Like you really, and just because people are older and more experienced or like millionaires or whatever, like I still need to make it very clear how I feel about things. And most of the time, people respect that. So.
I have to say,
continue that, you know.
In the time that I've been with Katy Musician, if there's one thing that's become obvious, it's that those artists who are most successful, at least commercially, also have control of their career.
Yeah.
You know, probably there was a time, if you read about music history, going back to the 50s, 60s, and that, where there was this idea of, you know, I'm the artist, someone else take care of the money and all that kind of stuff, and it usually worked out pretty poorly for them.
Yeah.
You know, despite whatever age, you know, age discrimination. What's the word I'm looking for? Age stereotypes. Young artists nowadays, I think, probably have the best grasp on the business of any generation in music in recent decades.
I think so, and I think it comes with the time that I think just having to be so savvy on the internet as a millennial. I mean, I'm a little older than a millennial, but if you want to do anything entrepreneurial, you have to have a really great understanding of this whole marketplace. And just by knowing those skills inherently, I feel like younger people are smarter nowadays and more informed, even politically, news-wise. Yeah, so it's a good time.
Well, Allie, I'll let you go. But again, this has been a very fascinating conversation with Allie X. New full-length album, COLLXTION II, is out. Check that out online in stores if you can find the record stores, and as well EP from 2015, COLLXTION I. Both absolutely worth a listen, and I really like what I've been seeing, what I've been hearing, and I'm excited to see where you go with this project.
Me too. We'll see. Thanks. Good interview.